Hey TSC fans, meteorologist Trey Greenwood here with a new video that we're going to try to do on a weekly basis every Sunday that will give you a bit more of a technical look behind the forecast for the upcoming week. Of course, David has his weather roundup videos on the Texas Weather Center YouTube channel, but for those of you who are weather weenies like I am, like all of us at TSC are, and want to know a little bit more of the science behind the forecast, we're going to be doing these videos on a weekly basis, starting with this upcoming week. So if you're looking for a little bit more of the why behind the forecast, this is going to be the video for you. And we're starting this up on an active week for weather across the state, as we have some severe weather to deal with both today, Sunday, and tomorrow, Monday, along with an accompanying excessive rainfall and flash flooding risk across parts of the state as well. Then the weather will turn quiet, much nicer weather for the Thanksgiving timeframe, before some unsettled weather may return for the upcoming weekend. Let's go ahead and start with our severe weather threat for today and tomorrow. This is the SPC, the Storm Prediction Center risk for today. We have a level 2 out of 5 slight risk in the yellow shaded region you see there. So that's basically going to encompass much of the I-20 corridor out in West Texas. So places like Midland, Odessa, over toward almost Abilene, cuts off just west of the Abilene area. But folks in there will be dealing with the greatest threat for severe weather in that yellow shaded region there today. We do have a level 1 out of 5 marginal risk in the dark green shading there, extending into places like Fort Stockton, San Angelo, Abilene in that level 1 out of 5 risk, and the western portions of the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex in the level 1 out of 5 risk. But again, the greatest threat for severe weather in the yellow shaded region you see there for today. We do have a threat for large hail. That's going to be the main reason driving this severe weather risk today. This is the hail threat maximized in that yellow shaded region there, and a low-end tornado risk as well in the green area that coincides with that level 2 out of 5 slight risk. So again, large hail going to be the main threat for today, Sunday, but an outside chance for a tornado or two does exist with any more robust storms today. Then we move on to tomorrow, and we have a little bit more of a severe threat that will be shifting east into eastern parts of the state, as well as the ArkLaTex. So from southern Arkansas, northwest Louisiana, down into northeast and east central Texas. So the Waco corridor down almost toward Austin, cuts off just north of Austin, the level 2 out of 5 slight risk persisting into tomorrow. Places like Lufkin up toward Longview, Tyler, Texarkana, in that level 2 out of 5 slight risk for tomorrow. And then a level 1 out of 5 marginal risk extending up into the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex, Paris, Texas, down toward Austin, San Antonio, Victoria, the Houston Metroplex in that level 1 out of 5 risk as well. But again, the greatest risk for severe weather tomorrow, Monday, in this yellow shaded region there. Tomorrow, perhaps could see a little bit of an uptick versus today as far as the severe weather threat goes. We do have a 5% tornado risk, which doesn't sound like a lot. But if you can imagine that maybe 1 to 2% of all thunderstorms in the U.S. produce tornadoes in a given year, the fact that we have a 5% risk in just this brown shaded region here for tomorrow is quite an elevated risk. So the tornado risk is a little bit higher than it is today for tomorrow's threat. Again, maximized in the brown shaded region there. So basically Waco eastward toward Lufkin, Longview, Tyler, up toward Texarkana. And we also have the threat for damaging winds and large hail, damaging straight line winds maximized in the yellow shaded region there, as well as large hail maximized in the yellow shaded region as well. So a robust couple of days on the severe weather front. So let's go ahead and dive into some of the data. We'll start off by taking a look at what's going on in the upper atmosphere as we speak. I'm recording this just before 10 a.m. Central Time this morning, and this is at 500 millibars, which is about 18,000 feet off the ground. And this is where we look for troughs and ridges. Troughs are these downward kinks in the black solid lines you see here. Ridges are those upward kinks in those lines. For severe weather, we're looking for troughs, and you can see that we have a pretty well-defined trough out here centered across Arizona as we speak. The center of the trough right there over Arizona with some strong winds rounding the base of this trough. That's what the blue shading is for. And in the exit region of a trough, if you were to think of this like a ski jump or a skate ramp, the winds go through the trough into the exit region of the trough. So basically, on the right side of the trough axis, that's where the strongest uplift is, the air that's rising, which is what we need for severe storms to happen. That's all going to be found on the right side of the trough axis, or the exit region. And that is going to be moving into West Texas during the morning and afternoon today, leading to the initial initiation of storms by this afternoon, as we're going to have plenty of forcing with this well-defined trough. Very high amplitude trough at this kind of ski jump, if you will, has dug very deeply down into western Mexico, and that is allowing for pretty strong forcing out across that is going to be overspreading parts of eastern New Mexico and West Texas through the afternoon. Heading up to 300 millibars, which is in the upper reaches of the atmosphere, this is where we look for winds that are spreading apart. This is something called defluence. When the wind vectors are spreading apart in the upper levels of the atmosphere, that creates a bit of a void, and Mother Nature doesn't like that. So what happens is air is brought up from below to fill that void, and that's another reason why we get rising motion in the exit region of these troughs. And you can see here these wind barbs. Basically, if we're looking at one of these little flag things you see here, these are called wind barbs, and the direction of the wind basically goes through these little flags or staffs right here toward the end of the barb. So you can see that in the exit region of our trough, we have quite a bit of defluence to talk about here. Winds over southern Colorado, northern New Mexico, basically out of the due south, switching to much more southwesterly flow in the West Texas vicinity. That's a pretty good amount of those wind vectors spreading apart in that upper reach of the atmosphere. So again, that is going to continue to overspread the region through the afternoon, allowing for that rising motion that we need to initiate storms across West Texas. Now, oftentimes when we have a robust trough like this, one that's farther north than this one is, it will encounter the higher terrain of the Rocky Mountains. And usually that induces a surface low that develops on the east side of the Rockies, somewhere in northeast New Mexico, eastern Colorado, or the vicinity. That is not the case with this trough. It's a little bit too far south to really encounter the higher terrain of the Rockies. So we're not going to see a robust low-level response, at least with this trough today. We're going to start to see that change going into tomorrow, as based on what some of the models are showing, and we'll show you some model data here in just a second. But we're not going to see a real strong surface response with this system. And I'll go to the surface map here for you and show you that we don't really have that at this point. You'd want to see those wind barbs, those flags that we showed just a minute ago, kind of rotating in a counterclockwise fashion. That would indicate a surface low that develops, and usually a lot of closed contours. These are pressure contours here, or isobars. They would be closed around the center of the low pressure area. Like you see up here, this is a nice surface low pressure system. The winds are moving in a counterclockwise direction, and you have some of those closed contours there. That is a nice surface low there up in eastern Canada. We don't really see that at this point out across eastern New Mexico or eastern Colorado or vicinity. Again, that's going to change, but with the track of this trough, it's not going to be interacting with the Rockies in a favorable manner to initiate strong surface cyclogenesis or surface low development today. Again, that's going to change tomorrow, but for today, we're not going to see a very strong low-level response. So that's going to keep the winds fairly weak in the West Texas area and in parts of South Texas where our moisture is located. Let's go to some of our surface data right now. Let me refresh this so it's the most up-to-date data. So what you're seeing here is all of the surface weather stations and all the data from the surface weather stations across the southern plains. Each one of these is called a surface station plot. The top left red value there, that's the surface temperature. The green value is the surface dew point, so our moisture value. And then you see our wind barb there. Again, the direction is going through those flags or staffs toward the center of the station, that central circle there. And that is how you read a surface station plot. You can see that the winds right now are out of the east-southeast across much of Texas, and really even the east across much of South Texas. And that is not a super favorable direction to get all of the best moisture up into our area of interest. You can see the best dew points, those 60s and 70s dew points, are confined to the coastal regions of South and Southeast Texas. Some 70s dew points down there by Brownsville, Corpus Christi, up along the Texas coast there. That's where our best moisture is, and because we're not going to see a really strong surface low developing in northeast New Mexico or eastern Colorado today, these winds are not going to change a whole lot. They might become much more out of the southeast, so the direction might become favorable, but the strength of these winds not going to become favorable. When you get a strong surface low, that tends to increase the strength of the winds at the surface. And that's not going to be the case today. So we're not going to be able to get this really robust moisture into our severe weather threat area for today. However, it is November, and you don't need some of those 60s and 70s dew points that you would need in the spring months, April, May, June, to have severe weather in Texas. You don't need them in the cool season, as we call it, October, November, December. All you need is some decent moisture, and you can see the 50s dew points that are sitting across much of central Texas. Those are going to slowly make their way up to the northwest into West Texas for our area of interest today. And that's going to create a dry line with some drier air to the west. The dry line is that boundary between the dry air to the west and the warm, moist air to the east. That's going to set up somewhere near the Texas-New Mexico border down into far west Texas, and that's going to be our initiating boundary for today's storms. Again, we're going to have adequate moisture, nothing crazy, but adequate moisture for our severe weather threat today as these 50s dew points get pulled up to the northwest on this southeasterly flow through the morning and afternoon today. So we should have adequate moisture for a severe threat today, but not really enough moisture for a really high-end severe weather threat today. That's one of the limiting factors for the setup today. But again, plenty of moisture for a severe threat in today's setup. All right, here are some of our model data. This is the North American model, initialized this morning. This is the latest run of the North American model. We'll start at 500 millibars here and show you the progression of these features through the day. So here is our trough. Again, very well-defined trough there over the desert southwest. Strong flow into the exit region of this trough. This is going to shift off to the east as we go through the day today. You can see by 18Z, that is noon Central Daylight Time, or Central Standard Time, excuse me, we start to see the stronger winds impinge upon that West Texas vicinity. And then going into the afternoon, we fully see those winds start to overspread. Those yellow colors there, those are the stronger winds associated with this trough, starting to overspread much of West Texas. That's going to be when the forcing is going to arrive. So early to mid-afternoon is when we should expect to see storm initiation out across kind of the Texas-New Mexico border region along the I-20 corridor. It's kind of where the forcing is going to be focused with today's setup. This trough is going to move off to the east going into tomorrow. We'll get into tomorrow in just a second, but overall, this is what the trough progression for today is going to shift off to the northeast and east going into the overnight hours tonight, setting us up for tomorrow's severe weather threat. Now let's go down to the surface and show you how this is going to play out. I'll zoom into our southern plains sector here, and you can see that we're not going to see a robust surface low develop anytime in today's setup. You don't really see that, the strong closed contour, strong counterclockwise flow of the winds there. The winds do remain out of the southeast for today's setup, but again, not very strong at all. These are about 5 to 10 knot winds out across much of Texas. Not a very strong flow to really pull those more robust dew points up into West Texas. And you can see that on our dew point map here. The blue and purple colors are where our best dew points, where our best moisture is located. And you can see confined to South Texas this morning. And it's going to take a while for those to get up to the north. And you see the dark green colors get to the east of the dry line, the boundary between the dry air to the west, the brown colors there, and the green colors to the east. We do get mid to upper 50s dew points up to the I-20 corridor here on this particular model run. But those 60s dew points, which we need for a real robust severe weather event, are not going to be present. They're going to stay down there until we get into tomorrow. When we get a little bit more of a surface response, those dew points will start to get pulled northward into much more of Texas, setting us up for perhaps a more robust event tomorrow. But for today, moisture is going to be on the lower side, still adequate, but on the lower side for severe weather. And that is going to keep us from having a much more widespread event today. Let's go ahead and take a look at a potential sounding from today. So we'll take one here kind of just, this is going to be at 21Z, so this will be at 3 p.m. Central Standard Time. And we'll take a potential sounding out here just near the Midland-Odessa area there in West Texas. Again, this is kind of where storms are expected to fire by early to mid-afternoon today. So this is what is going on, and this I'll give you a crash course on how to read this. This is an atmospheric sounding. So basically, the model here is estimating that if you were to let a weather balloon go that has instruments on it at this particular location that we selected there in West Texas near Midland, Odessa, if it were to be released at that location, what would the atmosphere look like? The red line you see here is our temperature profile as the balloon goes up. The green profile is our dew point, or moisture profile, as the balloon goes up. And this blue profile, this blue dashed line here, this is our parcel trace. So if a hypothetical box of air were to be released in this environment, what would it encounter? When this blue dashed line is to the right of the red temperature profile, we have an unstable atmosphere. When it's to the left, we have a stable atmosphere. And you can see here that we do have that blue dashed line to the right of our red temperature profile throughout much of the entire atmosphere. Now the CAPE profile, CAPE is our measure of instability, this space between the blue dashed line and the red temperature profile, is fairly skinny. Usually you'd like to see a profile that has a little bit more space in between those, more of a fatter CAPE profile is what we like to call it in the storm chasing and meteorology world. But here, this profile is a little bit on the skinny side. So this is going to lead to a little bit less robust updraft strength for any storms that do start to initiate in this environment. But the main crux here is that we do have plenty of instability in this environment to support robust updrafts. Our measure of CAPE, which again is our instability measure, over 1,500 joules per kilogram. That's more than adequate for severe weather. Really, you only need a couple hundred joules per kilogram to support severe weather, and we're seeing values over 1,500 with this particular sounding. So we do have enough instability to support severe weather, severe storm initiation in this environment. Just the strength of the updrafts might be a little bit tempered because this instability profile is a little bit on the skinny side. We do see a surface temperature profile, temperature of 77 at the surface with a dew point of 57, which is a little bit of a high spread between the temperature and the dew point. Usually you want to see those a little bit on the lower side, those values a little bit closer together. That allows the cloud bases to be lower, less dry air in the low levels. When you have more of a spread between the temperature and the dew point at the surface, that leads to more evaporation of precipitation that falls out of storms, and that leads to more damaging outflow winds, straight line outflow winds, versus more of a tornado risk. With lower cloud bases, we tend to see more of a tornado risk when the other ingredients are there, but spreads are going to be a little bit on the high side today. It looks like about 20 degrees, which is right at that threshold maybe for supporting tornadic supercells, but overall they are a little bit on the high side because we can't get that real robust moisture into the region, and so that is going to lead to perhaps more of a large hail and maybe an isolated damaging wind risk with today's setup rather than more of a robust tornado risk. Also, with this keeping the tornado risk on the low side is that low-level wind shear is going to be on the low side. This is our hodograph up here on the top right of the diagram, and this shows us how the winds are changing as you go up in the atmosphere. For tornadic setups, you want to see more of a meat hook type shape, so large curvature in the low levels with a lengthy upper portion of the hodograph. And you can see that that's not really what we have in this particular modeled hodograph. The hodograph is really very straight throughout its entirety, not a ton of curvature in the low levels of the hodograph. That is due to that limited low-level response that we talked about from earlier, and that's going to lead to more of a straight line hodograph, more potential for large hail as a result. So the threats today definitely looks like large hail and maybe isolated damaging winds are going to be a threat with these storms that fire. But we do have plenty of changing of the wind direction and speed with height. You see those surface winds out of the southeast, switching to more southwesterly aloft, and those winds are strengthening as you go up. So plenty of wind shear in the entire atmosphere to support supercells, rotating thunderstorms that can produce all severe hazards, including tornadoes, but the overall profile here not really supportive of a robust tornado risk. Could a tornado happen today out in West Texas? Certainly could, not off the table by any means at all, but the main threat is going to be large hail and damaging winds with the storms today out there. So here is one of our high-resolution models that gives us an estimate of what the radar might look like in a particular environment. This is this morning's high-resolution rapid refresh model. And so we'll go through with time. This is what the radar might look like as we go through the afternoon. This is going to be at 20Z, so 2 p.m. Central Time. And you see some more robust storms starting to fire there right in the Midland-Odessa area. And as we go forward in time, you see those are getting quite robust, fairly isolated in nature. A couple of more isolated, stronger cores of those dark red colors you see there. Those are isolated cores of storms. And you see the black streaks that are kind of trailing off of these storms kind of right in there. You see one small one in there. Those are updraft helicity streaks, basically just showing you that the model is thinking that the storm is going to spin. In other words, it's a supercell. So this particular model is showing supercell development by early afternoon out in West Texas, and they persist for quite a while. Again, mainly a large hail and maybe an isolated damaging wind risk. The tornado risk will be low as we go into the evening hours today. Those storms continue on and then kind of fizzle out before more develop going into the overnight hours tonight. We should see convective coverage or storm coverage increase as we go into the overnight hours tonight, up from the kind of Red River down all the way into west central Texas, and that is going to lead to a flash flooding threat as well. We'll get to that in just a bit here. But I want to talk about tomorrow, Monday. I'll zoom back out on our map and show you what's going to be driving the severe threat for tomorrow's setup. So we go through the evening tonight. The trough continues off to the east. We're back at 500 millibars here. The trough moves off to the east. This is Monday morning, 6 a.m. Central Standard Time tomorrow morning. Trough continues off to the east, and some of those stronger winds start to overspread parts of East Texas and the ArkLaTex region going into the afternoon tomorrow. Now, the trough certainly has lost a little bit of its definition, but certainly still enough of a trough here to allow for that rising motion that we need in the exit region of this trough, focused from the ArkLaTex down into East Texas. Let's go down to the surface here, show you what is going to happen, and I'll keep it zoomed out here. We'll start this evening, and you'll see up there in eastern Colorado, so focus your eyes right in this area here, you'll start to see a little bit of a surface low develop there overnight tonight. And you see the closed contours here, the counterclockwise flow of the winds in that area. That is a weak surface low that is developing on the Kansas-Colorado border by overnight tonight. This is going to be at 3 a.m. Central Standard Time tonight, and that surface low kind of moves off to the east and meanders to the southeast tomorrow. Not really a strong surface low by any means, and it does sort of weaken through the day. But that is going to allow for those winds in the warm sector, the area where the moisture is, to be more out of the south, to push those stronger dew points up farther into Texas. We see our dew points here are starting out this evening, again, still situated down there in South Texas, but as we go into the overnight hours, those blues and purples start to really rapidly make their way north into much of Texas tomorrow. This is at 18Z, so noon Central Standard Time. There's our dry line / Pacific front, our moisture gradient, if you will. Warm frontal zone situated here, kind of the northward extent of the returning moisture. And so anywhere to the south of this warm front and east of this dry line, that's where our severe weather threat is going to take place. And this might be a little bit farther west than what might actually happen. But by 0Z, this is going to be 6 p.m., our dry line Pacific front is situated there all the way up to those 60s dew points, all the way up to the Red River into southern Oklahoma, and our warm front is draped down to the south like this. So a very broad warm sector at this point, all those blues and purples over a lot of real estate across much of the eastern half of Texas. Again, we're going to have a lot of storms firing on this actual Pacific front dry line feature there, the moisture gradient there out to the west. That convection is likely to be on the messier side, more of a damaging wind risk with those. But because we have so much space here out ahead of this line in the warm sector, and the flow is going to be fairly strong out of the south, that is going to allow for plenty of room for there to be open for more isolated supercell development in the open warm sector. And those storms, if they can persist, if they can develop and maintain themselves, will have the greatest threat for tornadoes and large hail out in the open warm sector. We'll show you some convection allowing model data here in just a second. But overall, this is a lot of space for this warm sector to have. Plenty of space ahead of the line for a robust threat for more isolated supercells ahead of the line. So let's go ahead and take a sounding here from out in the open warm sector. We'll take it kind of just east of the Waco area. And you can see the differences between today's profile and tomorrow's profile. So again, this is just east of the Waco area, tomorrow at 21Z, so 3 p.m. Central Standard Time, so mid-afternoon. And you see our instability profile, a little bit thicker here as we go all the way up through the atmosphere. 76 over 68 at the surface. So our surface temperature is being progged at 76 here over a dew point of 68. So that spread between the temperature and the dew point is much lower, meaning lower cloud bases, less chance for evaporation of precipitation, and a better chance for any supercells to become tornadic. Also because we have a little bit more curvature in the low levels of the hodograph. The winds are curving a little bit more and strengthening a little bit more in the low levels of the atmosphere to lead to more low-level shear, which is what tornadoes feed off of. So we have more instability, about 1,500 joules per kilogram once again, but a little bit fatter of a CAPE profile, of an instability profile, and stronger low-level shear, which will allow for a greater chance for there to be a few supercells that become tornadic tomorrow. Now the question is, will these supercells be able to fire in the open warm sector ahead of the line and persist? That's going to be the question. But the atmosphere here is uncapped. We don't see any areas where the blue parcel trace is to the left of the red temperature profile. So that should allow updrafts to become pretty much unhindered as they go up. If they were to hit a more stable layer, that would kind of block them from going upward in the atmosphere and reaching their full potential, but not really seeing that in this profile tomorrow. We should have plenty of forcing, rising motion from the trough. So I suspect that we will have a chance, a pretty decent chance for there to be a few supercells in the open warm sector tomorrow. And again, these would have the greatest threat for some tornadoes, perhaps an outside chance of 1 or 2 strong tornadoes tomorrow. That threat has not been explicitly stated by the SPC in their outlooks, although they did mention it in the most recent outlook. Here is the sounding at 0Z, so 6 p.m. tomorrow. Plenty of instability, some curvature there in the low levels of the hodograph. So that tornado threat will persist into the evening with any supercells that can maintain themselves ahead of the line. And speaking of the line, that's going to be robust as well. Again, we're going to have plenty of storms as plenty of forcing overspreads the line, and strong convergence of the winds along this moisture gradient will lead to a lot of storms firing on that boundary. And so the line will have a severe threat as well. Isolated damaging wind gusts and maybe a spin-up tornado or two within the line. Folks in especially north central Texas, the DFW Metroplex, more than familiar with spin-ups within a squall line, and that certainly is a possibility tomorrow with low-level shear expected to increase versus what is going to happen today. So let's take a look at our convection allowing models for tomorrow. So you see overnight tonight we get a lot of that convection to develop on the moisture gradient there. And you see all of these little, I like to call them beans, these little showers in the open warm sector just streaming northward off of the Gulf. Well, these are kind of the seeds for those open warm sector supercells, and you see them traveling northward through the day, going through East Texas and Northwest Louisiana tomorrow afternoon. The line moves through, and we get just these continued showers out ahead of the main line, which is back in here, which also has a chance to be robust. Now, these convection allowing models do not forecast these open warm sector supercells very well, and oftentimes, as the closer we get to an event, the better they will be at depicting and making out these more robust updrafts in the open warm sector. Not really seeing a ton of robustness with the updrafts in the open warm sector on this particular run, but that does not mean that these showers won't have the potential to produce all severe hazards, including tornadoes. And again, by tomorrow morning, we might know a little bit more about that threat. So again, the line will have a threat for damaging winds, maybe a spin-up tornado or two, and then any of these little showers that can get going across East Texas ahead of the line will have a threat for tornadoes and isolated hail as well as damaging winds. So all hazards with those supercells will be possible tomorrow. And then as we go into the evening tomorrow, that line moves through. Threat will continue all the way down toward kind of the Houston area, going into the nighttime hours. And then by early Tuesday morning, the severe threat will be out of our hair into the southeast for Tuesday. Now, as we mentioned earlier, with all of these storms kind of training over the same areas today and tomorrow, there is going to be an excessive rainfall and flash flooding risk with this setup. This is the Weather Prediction Center's excessive rainfall forecast for today, and the yellow shaded region here is where the greatest threat for excessive rainfall and flash flooding is. This is a slight risk, and there are only 4 categories with the Weather Prediction Center's flash flood outlooks, so this is a level 2 out of 5 slight risk for excessive rainfall and flash flooding in the yellow shaded region. So that goes all the way from West Texas, the Midland, Odessa area, up toward Dallas, Fort Worth, and into southern Oklahoma. So pretty broad region where excessive rainfall and flash flooding is expected. A level 1 out of 4 marginal risk in the green region there as well. This is for tomorrow. The threat shifts off to the east, a level 1 out of 4 marginal risk all the way down to the Texas coast, central Texas hill country, Dallas-Fort Worth, all the way up into the Ohio River Valley. But the greatest threat tomorrow, again, in that level 2 out of 4 slight risk, the yellow shaded region there. So areas just east of the DFW Metroplex up toward the ArkLaTex region into northern Louisiana, much of Arkansas, northwest Mississippi, far southwest Tennessee. So the threat there does exist for excessive rainfall and flash flooding. We saw with some of our model data here that we're going to have just a lot of storms training over the same areas. So you see here from southern Oklahoma into Texas, all of those storms and going to be training over the same areas there. And so this kind of corridor from West Texas up into the Red River region, going to see multiple rounds of storms, and with instability in the atmosphere like we discussed earlier for our severe threat, that also leads to more impressive rainfall rates from some of the strongest storms. So stronger rainfall rates, lots of moisture in the atmosphere, especially going into tomorrow. That is going to lead to the threat for significant rainfall and some localized flash flooding impacts with some of these storms. Here is the QPF, the quantitative precipitation forecast for today. So this goes through 6 a.m. tomorrow morning, from 6 a.m. this morning to 6 a.m. tomorrow morning. And you can see that band of highest rainfall amounts focused there through much of west central to north Texas. Values there in the purple to the dark red in the kind of 2 to 3 inch range there, and that is expected to focus from west central Texas up toward almost the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex. DFW Metroplex is kind of right in here. So we're seeing going again through 6 a.m. tomorrow, the heaviest rainfall goes right up to the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex, down to the southwest, going into west central Texas. And then as we go into day 2, which would be 6 a.m. tomorrow morning through 6 a.m. Tuesday morning, you see some of those purple colors persisting there across the ArkLaTex region into southern Arkansas and northern Louisiana. So the threat there for some flash flooding with rainfall amounts on each day, 2 to 3 inches possible in those corridors, for a total really of maybe 4 to 5 inches in some of those places. Flash flooding is going to be concerned with this threat over the coming days. This is the total over the next couple of days, expecting to see values there perhaps over 3 inches, approaching 4 inches, maybe in some localized areas 4 to 5 inches in some of those urban areas, and anywhere where soils are a little bit more saturated from previous rainfall, we may see more of a threat for flash flooding in those areas. So along with the severe threat comes a threat for heavy rainfall, and that is going to be our main issues for today, Sunday, and tomorrow, Monday. Beyond that, we are going to clear things out going into Tuesday. I'll back out here, show you the overall jet stream. So on the backside of the trough that goes through today and tomorrow, not really seeing much of an impact from any storm systems moving through, going toward the midweek time frame, the Thanksgiving time frame, and it's going to be pretty nice for that time frame as well. So Tuesday through the end of the work week, we're going to see pretty nice, beautiful, cool temperatures and sunny skies for these areas. You see on the NAM here going through Tuesday, temperatures up into the 70s and 80s across South Texas, 60s, upper 50s to 60s across north to central Texas. So nice weather there, winds out of the north, pushing all that moisture for severe weather down back toward the Gulf. So that is going to lead to, again, pretty quiet weather for your Thanksgiving. Nice, beautiful weather for that Thanksgiving time frame. And then we go toward the weekend, the upcoming weekend. As we turn the calendar toward December, we'll show you what happens here with our model. So this is the GFS ensemble model, more of our long-range model. And this is at 500 millibars. And this is going to be something to keep an eye out on for next weekend. Here's Thursday, Friday. And you see by Saturday and Sunday, we start to see a little more of that troughing coming back into portions of the southwestern quadrant of the U.S., putting Texas kind of in that exit region of any potential trough there. So that would mean that we might have a little bit more of that rising motion that we need for more unsettled weather. And as far as our moisture goes, again, this is for Saturday and Sunday. So watch our moisture there. This is for today and tomorrow. You see that moisture moves through, pushes off toward the Gulf as we clear things out for the middle of the week toward Thanksgiving. But then by Friday and Saturday, we start to see that moisture get pumped back north into Texas once again. Again, those blue colors are your 60s dew points. This is by Saturday morning, and then going into Sunday, that moisture kind of sticks around as well. So next weekend, potentially another round of unsettled weather. It's far too early to know any specifics on severe potential or flooding potential, but it does look like we'll see a little bit more of an active jet stream return for next weekend, coupled with more moisture return for next weekend, and that could mean more unsettled weather going into the Friday, Saturday, Sunday time frame after Thanksgiving is over. But for Thanksgiving, in the middle of the work week, that is going to be there's going to be some nice weather for you to enjoy the holiday. But first, we've got to get through this little severe weather stretch that we have today and tomorrow. Again, slight risk for today out in West Texas and tomorrow across the ArkLaTex region, with all hazards possible in the stronger storms today and tomorrow. Flash flooding is going to be a threat as well in these areas. And after that, we're going to be a little bit quieter, thankfully. But today and tomorrow, keep those weather radios handy. Keep it here on Texas Storm Chasers for the latest updates, and we will get you through this just fine. So thanks for watching. We'll see you back next week with another video for the following week as we go into December. But for now, thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.